So welcome, Chloe. It's great to have you with us. We're joined by Chloe Coleman from the Washington Post. This is the 8th in our discussion with photo editors. We think it's important to talk to these crucial members of the process of getting work produced, published and distributed. So thanks very much for joining us, Chloe. Perhaps just to begin with, you could just give us a little bit of a background about how long you've been a photo editor and how you came to be a photo editor.
Sure. First, thanks a lot for having me. I'm grateful to be here and talking to you guys today. So photo editing, I went to university to study photojournalism, thinking I was going to become a photographer. And towards the end of my schooling, I started realizing that I was becoming more interested in looking at the work of my classmates and talking about photography and helping them edit portfolios than I was with kind of doing my own on-the-ground projects. I started thinking that I maybe wanted to go to grad school, become a professor of photography. And then it was in my senior year that my professor at RIT, William Snyder, took our class to New York and DC, and I got to meet a lot of photo editors at a bunch of different big publications, and they talked to us like I'm talking to you guys now. And when I heard photo editors that were really passionate about what they did talk about why they were photo editors and why they loved it, I thought, well, that's why I thought I wanted to be a professor. So maybe I should try photo editing. And I was lucky to get an internship at NPR, National Public Radio in Washington, where it was sort of a hybrid photo editing, some photography internship. And I fell in love with it from there. I ended up working at the Denver Post in Colorado for my first kind of full-time photo editing job, and then returned to Washington in 2014 for a job at the Washington Post. And I've been there since then.
Great. During your education, was photo editing part of the training? Was there an element of kind of learning how to edit as part of the university education, or are the skills around editing something that you picked up through the work itself?
I laughed a little bit there because at the time I was at RIT, there was one photo editing class.
Right.
And I wasn't interested in taking it because I didn't think it was going to be anything I would enjoy. Not realizing that I was photo editing every day, and that, you know, my professors were working with me on photo editing as they would go through my projects and talk about what I had done right or what I needed to change, what I could go back and do better. And so, yeah, the school now has an amazing photo editing track where students, you know, learn about it earlier and can kind of shift their education towards editing, which I think is incredible. But yeah, at the time, it was something I just sort of slowly moved towards and then had that realization.
Yeah. So you're at the Washington Post, and as you said, you've been there since 2014. So obviously things are going well. Tell us a little bit about your responsibilities at the Post, your particular areas of responsibility and interest, and sort of how large the team is and where you fit in with that.
Yeah, you know, my responsibilities over the years have shifted a lot. I started out working as a photo technician, and my initial photo editing duties included obituaries and the weekly health and science section for print. From there, I moved to being the night news desk editor, which was a pretty wild role, and included mostly photo editing for print for the A section and the Metro section, and covering any night news. And then I guess it was 2018, I joined the international team where I am now. And I assign and edit photography along with my partner in international, Olivier Laurent. And the regions that I cover include the Americas, Europe, Russia, and Israel and Palestine. So it's a pretty big swath. Our organization is very large, but the photo department is large compared to photo departments at other publications, but small as a ratio of our newsroom. Right. And it has, it's grown some since I've been here, but not exponentially in any way. So, Olivier and I think are very strong partners. But it is a lot to be two people covering the world.
I never realized that. That is a lot. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Crazy.
How would you characterize kind of the state of media today for photographers, for people working in visuals and so on? I mean, the general thing that one hears very often is kind of a negative and downbeat assessment, lack of resources, no editorial assignments, et cetera, as though, of course, there was a golden period where the world was full of these things, which is a bit dubious. But how would you kind of summarize what you think the state of the media is today for people working in visuals?
I think it's one of these sort of constantly changing things where certain aspects of it improve while other aspects go away and aren't available anymore. And, most of us working in this industry, I think, know we always have to be ready to pivot, always ready to learn something new, grow our skill set, and be ready sort of for the next technology or the next thing that comes along. For us, even though the photo department hasn't necessarily grown, I think that the emphasis on visuals and visual storytelling definitely has. We've added departments like our visual forensics team. We've added visual editor roles that are, sort of the liaison between text editor desks and visual desks, and are there to help elevate and promote visual first storytelling. So in that regard, I think we've, continued to move forward in a way that's exciting. I think the thing that scares me most in the context, at least in the US, is the decrease in local journalism. Mm-hmm. I'm from a small town in rural Ohio, and seeing what's happened to my hometown paper and a lot of papers like it makes me disturbed, because, I think that's how people learn to trust journalism, is by their local news outlets.
Yes.
So I wish something would happen that could kind of give a good boost to local journalism.
Yeah. One of the things that's sort of been very prominent in the media industry, rightly so, in the last few years is kind of increasing attention to diversity, something of a reckoning with Me Too issues and so on. What's your take on where the state of play is in the industry now in terms of diversity, harassment, Me Too issues and so on, and what role do you think photo editors play or should play in addressing these sorts of concerns?
Yeah, I think our industry definitely needed that reckoning and needed to be part of that moment. Unfortunately, I know so many people who have experienced harassment within the industry. So I'm glad to see all of the progress that has been made the last few years, specifically, with identity kind of groups that have formed to help give photographers more of a platform, more of a place to be discovered by photo editors. And I think that's really fantastic. And I use a lot of those platforms myself to find new photographers, Women Photograph, and Indigenous groups and diversity groups have really helped, I think, kind of start that. And I think, photo editors have a lot that they can do. Hiring locally, if you're working with independent photographers a lot, I think makes a huge difference. Hiring locally, hiring what I would call hyper locally, so not just within country, but even closer to the city or the town that you're trying to assign in. Finding people who have that really deep experience from the place, or have worked there a lot and have a history of knowledge of the country, I think makes a big difference too. you know, I think you are responsible for checking yourself, you know, every few times a year, stop, look at how many assignments you've had, look at who you've assigned, identify any unconscious bias that maybe you've had when assigning, and then try to correct that. And, you know, I know a lot of photo editors that practice that, and I would love to see everyone practice it. I think, you know, there's a lot more that can still be done, but I do believe we've made some good progress so far.
Yeah. I mean, earlier you were talking about the fact that you're a small team in terms of international stories at the Post, but there's a greater emphasis on visuals in storytelling and kind of image-led reporting and so on. I mean, how would you characterize kind of the major contribution of visuals to storytelling? Is there a particular set of qualities that go with an image that they bring to storytelling? I mean, what's driving that increase in attention to image-led storytelling, do you think?
I think it could partially be just how much images have infiltrated everyone's daily life in many ways. You know, a lot of young people are used to getting their news on social media, on various apps. They're used to having images be a part of everything that they do. They're used to documenting their own lives. And so I think that, you know, there's this realization, maybe more now, that images can help people feel engaged, and especially young people who we're trying to draw into our audiences, especially. And, you know, the thing about photography, especially with digital storytelling, in my opinion, is that it always makes a piece feel more immersive, more like you're there, and that you can understand a place or a person better when you have images as part of the story.
Yeah. And what about the difference between still photographs and moving images and video? I mean, does video play a role in the Post's storytelling? Is that something that you deal with? And how do you assess the benefits or the contributions of a still image versus a section of video and moving images to a story?
Yeah, we're lucky in that we have, you know, a full video team. So I work with some great video editors. Normally, if we're working on a story that is going to have both photography and video, we have conversations ahead of time about, okay, what can each medium bring to this story that's going to add to the conversation, and find a way where we're not competing. Because, you know, the worst feeling is when you get into an editing meeting with a group of other visual editors and you go, here's the photos, here's the video, and it's the kind of the same content. So you definitely want to try to avoid that. I think video has two kind of big options that I see when I'm working, which is kind of like the opt-in or the opt-out. If it's a standalone video piece that has a play button, audience has to click and watch, versus pieces that would have what I would call video elements, which are more like moving stills, which, you know, sometimes I ask photographers their comfort level in creating those, because, you know, having that bit of movement in a piece can increase that immersive factor.
Yeah. Great. You were going to share one particular story with us that you've worked on, and take us through some of the decision making and the thinking behind that story. Let's do that now. And while you're setting that, just a reminder to everyone, we see it's a question or two coming in. If you've got questions, drop them in the Q&A box. We'll certainly be dealing with how to contact Chloe afterwards and how to submit ideas to her. So that's something that that's one of our most favorite questions that people have at this point. But Chloe, take us through this story, why you've selected this one, and tell us about the process behind it.
Sure. This one leads nicely off of talking about stills versus video. This was the last story in a long series I worked on last year with our Brazil bureau. It was called The Amazon Undone. And it was looking at, you know, how crime and policy have affected the Amazon rainforest in Brazil. This particular piece, I worked with a photographer who is from this region in Brazil, Rio Branco, and Alexandre Cruz Noronha. Because he is so local, we were able to have him photograph this story about once a month from April to September. So we're trying to show, the change in this area that was historically, very water rich, that has become very dry and has these kind of extreme dry seasons where people who live in a rainforest are not able to have enough water. So, it was, and I worked with a video editor, and Alessandre did both the drone video and the stills. Alexa, the video editor, and I talked through, okay, we kind of are thinking that the drone video will give this sweepy overview and show the change over time of, wet season to dry season. The photography was meant to be a bit more on the ground with the people that we were talking to and profiling throughout these months that we worked on the story. So we used what we would call our photo flow template for some of these kind of flow through galleries. The first one in the piece is meant to introduce us to the woman who is the main character, who lives in this area and has a lot of trouble getting water for her family. And so with this kind of template, I just like to think about how do the photos kind of fade into one another. I'll think a lot about color and light to keep things from being, particularly jarring as they flow. And I like them too because they really pull you out of the text and kind of force the viewer to spend some time with the images. We work a lot with the graphics department as well. We made some really informative maps for this piece. And then at each subhead, there's another video element that gives you a bigger sense of the area and the city. Then we had this kind of great graphic that explains the path of a drop of water through the rainforest.
Wow, that's beautiful too.
Yeah, and our graphics team is amazing at they'll come and ask me, what are the colors in the photographs of this piece to try to make color schemes work together.
Wow.
So it's definitely a fun one to spend some time with. And I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people here feel the same way I do. I'm a visual learner. So these kinds of graphics can really help me understand complicated scientific processes.
Definitely. Much easier and nicer than reading very long.
Yes.
Beautifully done.
So then we also have this other kind of video stack. That's again just these short video elements that kind of move you through this part of Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
This was a video fade, so you get a sense of, how big the river is to then how much it dries out throughout the year. And then we move to another character, Freddie, who delivers water in this region. And so this chapter got to focus more on one person, allowed us to use some more photo flows where we kind of learn about how people are storing water and how it's being delivered to them in these more remote areas. Freddie drives these big trucks. So again, just something that breaks you out, introduces you to the person, lets you see a bit of what their life is like. And
That's
then
interesting because when you hear about Amazon and deforestation and environmental issues and so on, you rarely see stories about the daily life aspects and so on. So I feel like this is showing us something that's rarely disclosed, actually getting quite granular at that level.
Yeah, and it's just one of those topics where I think, that's what you need to do. You need to help understand how people are affected in their daily lives by these big overarching kind of topics.
So did you stories out of the ones that you work on, it's a very large production using this particular software and so on. Do you have a certain number of stories a year that you would do this way, or does it depend on the story? How do you make that decision?
It kind of depends on the story, and we try to, at the beginning of the year, or ideally the end of the year previous, discuss with each of the bureaus we work with what their sort of big project ideas are for the upcoming year. So I knew that the bureau chief, Terrence McCoy, had this as a plan for 2022, and it had always been my goal to make it a big visual push. So each of the stories in the series, and in total there were 6, are pretty big, but this one, the last one, the tipping point story, I would say had the biggest investment from me, from the photo desk, because I was able to have Alessandro do so many trips. Well, not trips so much as just returning assignments since he was there.
So while you were editing this, you would send him back for a next chapter, or did you?
Yeah, he would
to put together this.
Yeah, he would take his photographing days, and then he would file to me, and I would give him feedback about the images he filed. We'd talk about, as the months went on, the story, it wasn't written yet when we started, right? So we had kind of our visual goals between myself and the video editor. And then as the months went on, as Terry continued reporting, as the text draft was shaped and he had more ideas about where the story was going, then we were able to give more feedback and kind of make a more informed plan about, okay, we want to focus still as much as we can on these particular people and their daily lives. And so, it was really a nice way to be able to work that I don't have the opportunity to do that much, where I can spend that much time.
And it makes such a big difference to spend so much time. I always wish with projects, time, money and time, which is of course connected to each other, is of course an issue. But when you see a project like this, you really know that it makes a big difference if you have time. It's beautiful.
Yeah, exactly.
And so nice to work on. I love these ones, the video stills. What's it called? Video.
Yeah,
the name, right?
There's no formal name for them, really. I call them video elements, but moving stills or anything like that, I think works.
Yeah, I love making those because it's such a surprise always when you catch one and you think, oh, it's a picture. Oh no, it's not.
Yeah, and I think still photographers are really good at doing them because you know how to compose and see moments, and I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's that story.
It's really beautiful. So in this case, it was one of your writers who was already, this was all a big plan from the start. It didn't come from the photographer, right? As an idea.
Not in that instance, no. That does definitely happen sometimes. I also used to work on a section called Outlook, which was more of a perspective-based section, kind of news, essay, and opinion. The section closed last year, but that was a great spot where I like to get pitches directly from photographers because text usually needed to be in their voice. So that was great. We have our photo blog, which always looks for pitches directly from photographers. And then, as I've built relationships with independent photographers, like normally it's not going to be the first assignment that we ever do together that'll be something that a photographer pitched. But once we build a relationship, we work together, I know what they usually deliver on assignment, then that can kind of build from there, where they'll have story ideas and want to talk to reporters and me. And so it definitely does happen sometimes.
Yeah, and then you kind of know what you're going to get, of course, with the person you've worked with. So in general, is it possible for photographers, let's say maybe people who are listening in now, to pitch stories to you? Or
yeah, absolutely. I receive a lot of pitches, and normally I think it helps if it's a photographer I haven't worked with before, if it's maybe a project that they've started on their own and can show some examples of pictures, that definitely can help. So even if we haven't worked together, I can say, "Ooh, this looks like something I'd be interested in," whether it's because of the photos or the topic, or hopefully both. So yeah, definitely we all are very used to being pitched and welcome it.
And what kind of stories do you like to see coming in? Because you are in a very big region, to be honest, from Israel, Palestine, Russia.
Yeah, Europe,
America.
all of Europe except for France, because my dear French colleague wanted to cover France.
Olivier was like, okay, that's my country.
Yeah, which is how I ended up with Israel and Palestine, and he covers the rest of the Middle East. So it's a small trade.
Small trade there.
Very different coverage areas.
So when people pitch to you, it has to be from this, preferably from these regions, which still includes a lot, I guess. Preferably
for sure. When I worked on Outlook, when we had the Sunday magazine, which also closed last year, those were two other spots that I had more opportunities for, even if it wasn't within my areas of coverage. I could, if it was something I loved and really wanted to work on, they were potentially spots I could pitch to. Really, I like it if people who pitch to me are aware, at least, that I work in international news. If national US-based photographers pitch me and I see something that I think is great, I'll usually try to get it over to my colleagues in national. But yeah, I like to see that people have done a bit of research before they pitch me, for sure.
Yeah, that's always a good advice, I think, for I've heard from several editors, not necessarily on these chats, but just from knowing many editors, that there are photographers who are pitching stories to publications that don't even publish those kinds of stories. So it's, what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think also, trying to be a bit aware of what kind of stories have been published recently. If we do a big piece of strong black and white photography from Venezuela that you saw, that you loved, and you're like, oh, I have a project that looks like that, it's not the right time to pitch it to us because we just published something similar. So having a bit of a mind of what has come out of the region that you're pitching from recently, I think helps too.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when you get, like the story you just showed us, when you get all these images in, how do you like to edit? Do you like to print them out and have a big table, or you do everything on your screen?
Pre-pandemic, I'd say I did a mix of both. If it was a really big project, I would like to print out, small prints and take a conference room with a big table and move things around. I used to run the editing for our year in photos. I haven't done that in a couple of years, but the editors I worked with on that, we would make, massive amounts of prints to move around. But since the pandemic, I haven't really been doing that. I would say most of the time work on my screen. My husband's a photojournalist, and sometimes, we work on book projects together and we'll make prints for editing books, but largely for the assignment work I do with the Post, I'm working in photo mechanic.
Yeah, I love photo mechanic. That's also what I edit in. I think it's quite easy. I just did many of the what do you call it? The awards in the last weeks. Of course, there were many
Yeah,
deadlines, many
that time of
awards.
year. Yeah.
So my photo mechanic was kind of steam coming out of the machine, probably, because it's the only way to get with the color codes to make it
Yes.
organized
Yes.
in some way. And I can imagine if you get work in from like the Amazon story, you must be getting a lot of images. I'm curious about that actually. How many images do you get in on a big piece like that?
Usually it'll depend on the photographer. I tell people I want them to file an amount they're comfortable with. Usually I'll give them a ballpark depending on the amount of days that the assignment is. But if it's someone who hasn't had a lot of experience working with an editor yet and is just kind of looking to get more of an idea of what images would be selected from a take, and they send me a bit of a larger take, that's fine too. And then the other thing that's great with us too is, all of our stories, we can look at preview links, unpublished links. So I'll be able to preview how photos will look in a specific template in a specific story. And so sometimes I adjust edits from there as well.
Oh, that's a nice way of doing that. Kind of brings me to the next question. When people are pitching, do you like them to make these kind of fake these mock-ups of their work in a PDF to kind of show you what it could look like, or not at all?
I would say PDFs are usually my favorite way to get a pitch, something that has a short introduction to what the work is, and then just shows me some pictures. It doesn't have to be a ton, it can be enough. And then, if you have a link to a website where you have a wider edit, that's fine too. I usually advise photographers away from sending anything that's going to need to be downloaded, like WeTransfers or Dropbox folders. Our poor photo editor laptops are already crushed for memory all the time. So if it's a PDF, I can kind of preview in my email and then download if it's something I'm going to try to work on. That helps me.
To get it all organized. And in the PDF, let's get down to some really detailed details. How many images do you think, or how many pages? Like the perfect pitch, what does it look like to you?
That's hard to say. I wouldn't want to encourage photographers from including any photos they're not proud of to meet a number. But usually I think if, say like 8 to 12 kind of, maybe imagine if you were editing your story for a blog post, what would that look like? And that could be a PDF.
And then with the introduction, like you said, within the PDF, and then some text in the email as well, basically.
Yeah, usually for me, there doesn't need to be, a ton of text in an email. If we've not worked together, we don't know each other, it's always great to have a little introduction to who you are. And maybe just like a sentence or two about what you've sent me. And then I can look at the PDF from there.
So before we started, we chatted a little bit between us about photo festivals. Do you like going to those?
Yeah, I love going to photo festivals. It's a really great way to connect with photographers that I work with and see them in person, but also meet new photographers whose work I may not have found on my own. Whether it's through portfolio reviews or, just being at events together and having someone introduce themselves to me and give me a card, and I can look at their work later. It's a really great way to connect to people in the industry and expand my network.
And what makes a photographer stand out to you? So let's say you're at a festival and there are a ton of photographers as usual. How do people stand out to you? Like what kind of work or what kind of attitude?
I think it's kind of hard to say. I think people who maybe are familiar with the stories I've edited, you probably get a sense over looking at them what my aesthetic preferences are. You know, I love, you know, I work on a lot of hard news, but I also really love working on just kind of cultural feature stories. I love really good portraiture. And, you know, I don't know, there's usually just some kind of X factor with work if I just see something that speaks to me. I know that's hard because it's the subjective part of being a photo editor, but we all have our tastes in our eyes. And then when it comes to attitude, you know, I just like people who are nice, nice, polite, you know, not overly aggressive when showing work or talking about work, I think makes a big difference too. Because then I'll just like to assume that that person would, you know, have that same kind of attitude when we work together on a story.
Yeah, which is super important in this industry, of course. I'm just quickly checking to see, well, maybe David has seen it, if there's our questions are coming in.
Yeah, we've a couple of questions. I mean, you've
wait,
answered
I'm
some
in
of
the
the questions about how you like to receive a pitch, and I think it's worth actually underscoring that, because it's one of the most common things that our editors say in these conversations is much better to send a PDF, short text in the email, short text, story text on the PDF, short number of images, you said 8 to 12 approximately, something like that. Don't send links that require work, that require the editor to download things. That's just a friction point that's going to get in the way of making contact and so on. Yeah. So I think that's just worth underscoring. I think they're really good points, and many others have said exactly the same sort of thing. Yeah. We've got an observation from Lexi. She's based in Mexico City and says that the Post's coverage in the area is excellent. She wonders if you've changed the way you work in the last few years in terms of coverage in Mexico, Latin America, South America.
Change the way that I work? I don't think so. You know, we've added bureaus and we've added correspondence in parts of the Americas coverage, which has been great. I can't remember, my pandemic brain is a bit soft, but we added or reopened our Colombia bureau, which I thought was great. We've got a fantastic bureau chief there now. Our Brazil bureau became a lot more robust over the past few years once we had the bureau chief down there specifically, because before that we had kind of a Latin America bureau chief only who was based in Miami. So having more bureaus open where we have correspondents actually on the ground and working, actually, when I think about it, yeah, we have made some changes in the past few years that I think really improved our coverage in those areas.
It's nice that that you did that and that people actually see the change.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear.
Yeah, that makes a difference. There's a question coming in. Let me read from James. Hi, Chloe. Thanks for the talk. When editing, what's most important to you in creating a great story? Is it the topic, the people, the structure, narrative, a combination, or something else?
I would definitely say it's a combination. One thing that I usually like to press to the text editors I work with and the reporters is that stories that make great photography usually are about people and have, you know, people that we can spend time with. You know, there are other ways of telling stories. Like I said, I love portraiture, so if I have an opportunity to work on a project that maybe we don't have much time for, but is in a place where I have a portrait photographer that I love, we have access to the people who are really the voices in the story. You can do something a bit, you know, faster. That's more of a portrait voice-based story. But ideally, you know, I think like the project I showed, there's people that we're really spending time with, and you're able to actually give readers a sense of what people's lives are like and the issues that they're dealing with that are included in the story.
Do you sometimes also only use audio? I mean, pictures with audio instead of video.
I have done that before. There's a lot of back and forth about the success of audio in pieces. And I think sometimes it can make a really amazing piece. Olivier worked on one last year that I really loved about the sounds of Cairo, and that was a story about sound, and the audience super engaged in it. So I think just being really thoughtful about when and how you use audio can be effective for sure.
Yeah, it can be so beautiful, but you don't see it as much anymore. The one thing I know is that people hate it when I had it on one of the test websites I made for an interactive website a couple of years ago. And the one thing people hate is when sound just starts running. But I think if it's not the case, if it doesn't start running like that, it can be beautiful and immersive in a way.
Yeah, the way that we have dealt with it has been kind of an opt-in, opt-out button. So if it's an immersive audio experience, you can opt in at the top, and then it'll autoplay throughout. And I don't know, like, I don't want to say this with any kind of authority, but I would imagine that it has a lot to do with how much people look at news on their phones. If you're commuting or you're at your office and you're looking at a story and it just starts playing sound, I could see that being irritating to readers. So yeah, I think having the opt-in, opt-out helps with that.
100%.
Speaking of smartphones, this is a very good question from Rachel. She wonders if there are discussions as an editor that you're part of on how photo stories translate to mobile devices. The need maybe for smaller images, people scrolling, etc., etc. How do you deal with that? Because what you showed us was a story on a widescreen.
Yes.
How do you think about a story like that and it translating to a mobile device?
So any pieces that we work on that include our design team that are what we call custom builds, where designers are coding and creating the template for that particular story, are always going to have a very thoughtful desktop and mobile experience. And sometimes we like to think of a story mobile first and talk to photographers about, hey, the premier design for this piece is going to be for mobile. Let's talk about maybe taking more vertical photos. Let's talk about maybe square format. As a person who comes from kind of, my art school background and my love of medium format film, when I first started working in foreign, I was hiring, some film photographers for pieces that I was lucky to have these longer deadlines for. And I started, hey, it's square. It's perfect for mobile, even though it's an analog thing. It works really well with this technology. So that is definitely a conversation that is foremost with every project we work on.
Yeah. So important, given that that's the screen. The small screen is probably the first one that people encounter most of these stories on anyway.
Definitely.
Yeah. There's a question and a sort of a question comment from Steph. Do you receive credit for photo editing stories? Are photo editors actually credited in the stories themselves? The question is, if not, how do photographers know what kind of stories you have edited? So the answer to that is also that it's a team of 2 at the Post, and if it's an international story, there's a 50% chance it's going to be you.
Yes, yes. True. On big pieces like the one that I showed, I have a photo editing credit on that. So anything that has a credit box at the bottom will probably have a photo editor on it.
Right.
That's something that's, relatively new in the scheme of the Post. Definitely has not always been a thing. And I'm not sure if it exists at other publications. Yeah. But with us, if you see a big piece, and if you're thinking, hey, I'm a photographer based in Germany, and you try to find a bigger piece that's out of Germany, you might be able to find a photo editor credit on it, and that can help. But yeah, since it's just Olivier and I in foreign for now, reaching out to one of us, chances are we might end up pointing you to the other one, or you found the right person.
Yeah.
There's a question from Anastas. I've heard from other editors that they don't open any emails with attachment there and don't like big emails in general. How to put a PDF then? Oh, you can resize them. You can make a very small PDF. Is that, sorry, I didn't read the question before I answered it, but maybe you have an answer.
No, that was a good answer. And then also the thing that I can do with PDFs within my email program anyway is I can preview them without downloading. So that makes a difference too.
Yeah, and I think it's possible that some editors might express a preference for no PDF. All we can say is that out of our 8 conversations, I think everyone has expressed a preference for PDFs and not to have the work of having to download things.
Yeah, and I know that's part of what's difficult for photographers is you'll get a lot of different information from different people, and you can't make everybody happy, unfortunately.
No, and even if it's a screenshot, as Maggie is suggesting in one of the comments there, or whatever, it's going to be an attachment of some form to an email. It's going to
and unless you're sending a link to your website or a published piece of some sort, it's going to be an attachment. Yeah.
So I still think the PDF is on the basis of our conversations, a very strong piece of advice, and not make people click off to something else and download something, given the time pressures and so on.
James is teaching me a new word here, CPD.
Continuing.
I like the question. Yeah. So what's the CPD, continuing professional development journey for photo editors? How do you learn and develop your own craft?
That is a really great question. I don't know if I have the perfect answer for it. I would say for me, in the time that I've been in the post, what has helped me continue to learn and grow is to continually, over the years, change desks. I've been in foreign since 2018, but say, pursuing being a guest editor for the magazine helped me a lot because I was able to think about photographs in more of a long-term storytelling way. I was able to work on print layouts for magazine versus newspaper print, which helped me develop a new skill set. Outside of work, aside from going to photojournalism festivals, I also like to be a reviewer or a juror for more fine art documentary style photography as well. So I'm active in several different circuits in the US. A big one out of Portland, Oregon is Photo Lucida. And I'm able to think about photography in a different way when I'm in those spaces, which helps me too. I do things like, advise with my husband when he's working on documentary films and try to think about documentary film and how that can inform my practice as a photo editor. I think always expanding the way you think about different forms of visual information can help. And then just trying to stay up to date as technology changes. With us here, we're always developing some kind of new template. Things are changing with the way we think the audience enjoys viewing pieces, and that affects design, which can change how you think about photo editing too.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful answer to a great question. I wonder, I don't know, we have time? Okay, one quick question. When you just answered that question, something popped in my mind is the fact that the younger audience, to me, seems to be engaging shorter. I think they are. How do you deal with that in editing, or do you?
Well, I think, I don't know, with us, because I work on such a variety of pieces of varying lengths, a lot of pieces coming out of the international team are actually quite short. So thinking about how do we get the best use of a photo assignment in a written piece that's not very long. So especially when you're editing for digital platforms, the length of the text can often determine how many photos you can use, because generally I don't think people, if say images are just stagnant and stacked on your phone, you're not going to want to look at kind of like a big string of images that you're scrolling through. So normally I'll try to keep it to pairs or maybe 3 at the most that stack in a shorter piece. If it's something like the piece I showed where it does have a scrolling function with the immersive sort of photo flows, I think that gives you the opportunity to use more images than you would in a regular template. So yeah, it kind of is a template-based sort of thing for me.
Yeah, understand. Oh,
we've got a few minutes before we finish. We'll try and run through questions that we already have. Mehmet made a comment earlier saying that it's difficult to get the attention of a photo editor as a local photographer. How would you advise a local photographer you haven't worked with previously to raise their profile and get attention?
I think just doing the things that we've talked about, reaching out, sharing your work, being transparent about where you're based and the type of work that you're interested in. And then, I hate to say it, but sometimes just being patient, because it might require, I might have someone, bookmarked for a long time before I have that opportunity for the perfect story where you live that is a good fit for you visually and topically. So yeah, like you may not be getting the immediate gratification, but just making sure that you are reaching out to people and then not being shy to, check in every once in a while, remind people that you're still there, you're still working, sending a little bit of new work, and kind of trying to stay at the top of people's minds in that way, I think can help.
Yeah. Chloe, the most asked question, of course, is, do you have an email?
I saw that.
Share, so
I
that
do.
People can pitch to you.
I do have an email, and I'm going to tell this group the secret code to the email at everyone at the Washington Post. It's first name dot last name at washpost.com. Will get you anybody you're looking for at the Washington Post. So I'm Chloe.Coleman at washpost.com.
And I will post that while Ilvy asks a couple of final questions just in the chat so that everyone can see that written down. But yeah, that's been a much requested.
I saw that question pop up like 4 times, I think. So there's an anonymous attending asking, is Africa too far away to be of interest? Have you run stories in this region? I know you have, but it's not your region, right? Is that
right? Africa is not my region. It is Olivier's. So we definitely work in Africa a lot. We have multiple bureau chiefs there. So pitch Olivier with stories from Africa. Every once in a while, I've been able to do a story there, but it's been more because, for most recent example, my bureau chief in Italy went to Congo for a story that related to the Vatican. So that gave me a rare opportunity for the chance to work with an African photographer, which was a really great experience.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Peyton asks, in terms of a photographer, do you prefer working with those who have definite styles, or is it more effective to work with those with dynamic styles and skills?
Completely depends on the assignment for me. If it's something that I have envisioned as a portrait piece, then I'm definitely going to look for someone with the strong portrait work that I'm envisioning for the story. If it's more news-based, I like people to be pretty versatile and just have, a strong eye, but, the other thing that's important is, ethics and ability to write captions. So it's always story by story based.
Yeah. Timothy asks, what are your favorite photo festivals pre-pandemic? Because it's kind of starting back up now, but was a bit shaky for a while.
Yeah, I would like to go to more photo festivals and experience more photo festivals. I've been to Visa pour l'Image multiple times in France, which has been a great one for meeting international photographers. In the US, I've enjoyed the Photo Lucida, the one in Oregon. Just this year, I was able to go to Photo Nola in New Orleans. which was a good photo festival as well. So to be honest, I enjoy the ones I'm invited to. You know, I would go to any photo festival I was invited to.
I hope there's someone listening now that writes this down and invites you.
And what about portfolio reviews? Do you do portfolio reviews? Do you have particular ones that you go to?
I do portfolio reviews. I have done them the past few years at Visa pour l'Image. This will be the first year I've done the New York Times portfolio review. Pretty much any photo festival I mention, I'm there to do portfolio reviews. I don't do a lot of, one-on-one requested portfolio reviews just because, unfortunately, I just don't have the time, and it's not something I feel like is necessarily fair if I can't offer it to anyone who asks. Occasionally I will do that if it's special circumstances. But really it's if I'm invited to a festival, then I feel like if I'm there, I should be giving reviews. That's why I'm there as a member of the Washington Post photo staff, to meet photographers and to review work and to kind of help people where I can, and also discover work that we might want to publish.
So I think we've come to the end of our time. So just as there are a couple of questions that we can't get to, unfortunately, but we'll finish with one, which is, of course, probably the most challenging question of all for an editor. What's the biggest piece of advice you'd offer for someone who's trying to get published for the first time?
I think it kind of circles back to our conversation earlier, is just be nice, be empathetic. I love receiving pitches, but on a heavy day, I might get 10 pitches in one day. I'm trying my best to look at everyone's work, to respond to people. But I also have a lot of responsibilities just with my news duties during the day. And so I think just keeping that in mind, that I know for myself, I know for my colleagues here at the Washington Post, we are trying our best to respond to everyone, to look at everyone's work, to consider everyone that reaches out to us. So just being kind, being empathetic, and not being shy to, if you don't hear back, send that follow-up in a couple of weeks, because your email might be flagged and someone meant to respond but didn't have that moment, and that getting back to the top of the inbox can make a big difference.
But wait a couple of weeks, show some
patience.
Don't be pushy.
That's great, Chloe. We really appreciate your time and presentation and answering those questions. Frankly, I've circulated your email, and you've given away the secret Washington Post code of first name dot last name at washpo.com, so people can also find Olivier that way. I'm sure you'll be hearing from a few people, but thank you very much, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And thank you everyone in the audience also for coming. Great turnout and great questions as always. A recording of this will be online within about a week or so you can watch it again and follow up on some of the advice too, and also watch the other videos in the editor's series. Thanks, Chloe.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye.